Warrior, I want to talk about one of the most important issues surrounding human trafficking, exploitation. It is not talked about enough. It is not sexy. It is not something that gets clicks and likes, but it is something that we must address. And that is, we could end, intervene, and prevent so much of this exploitation, of this trafficking, if we put the focus on ending the demand. Now, what does that mean, ending the demand? Hold the buyer accountable and protect the victim. Traditionally, girls, boys, women, and men get arrested, get hauled in, get accused of prostitution. By the way, I don't think, and the justice system is all over the map with this one in the United States, that you can charge a minor with prostitution. But let's just say a 16-year-old girl, as an example, gets arrested, brought to jail, prostitution. They lean on this minor to find out who the trafficker is. They really put pressure on them. Bear in mind that this minor then gets a police record. It's that simple. We deal at the Warriors with so many survivors, adults now, whose lives are basically ruined because they get a police record, they cannot rent an apartment, they can't get jobs, they can't get on certain committees or boards, all kinds of things. They have to work very hard to get their records expunged, if they can even do that at all. It takes a lot of wherewithal. It takes a lot of legal attention, pretty much pro bono from lawyers who want to work in this field, really helping people. But if we put that kind of attention and arrested the buyers, and sure, you may see headlines that, somebody was arrested and they get community service, somebody was arrested and or hauled in and questioned, or they have to go to it's very old-fashioned, the John Court type thing. But if we could just talk about holding the buyer accountable and protecting the victim, because one important nuance also is following the money, right? Most of our victims, survivors that talk with the Warriors and that we work with have explained to us all of this exploitation and horror, right? And they don't even see a dime. They are so mentally conditioned of they have a roof over their head and some food to eat, that's all they get. So when people say this is a free will, I was just speaking with a judge and he was sharing with me, and this has been a common thinking among a lot of men. Oh, the poor girl. Now we're talking about minors right now. Oh, the poor girl, the poor boy. I thought I was helping them out, giving them a little money. What kind of thinking is that? I was even in the office, no names, here in New York, and an elected representative, let me be vague about this, at the end, and being with survivors with me and explaining what is going on in his neighborhood and how it was exploding, and also minors, because remember, Warriors, the demand is for minors, for kids, the younger the better. At the end of all of this, and he has been in office a long time, he says to me, well, aren't men just lonely and need companionship? Now, right then and there, bye-bye, let me get out of this office. This is a person who will never understand when we have thinking like that. But following the money, holding the buyer accountable, protecting the victim, those are the three pillars I want to stand on, because this market for commercial sexual exploitation, demanding reduction alone, eliminating trafficking, that is not true. It would help, right? Let's be real here. We're never going to stop human trafficking. We're just not going to, at least in my lifetime. And that harms and hurts me to say this and share that with you, but that's the truth. And we at the Warriors give you the truth. But the evidence supports, there's a lot of evidence around that supports, if we worked on ending demand and holding buyers accountable, that this would definitely be a critical part of the trafficking equation, of reducing it and also protecting these vulnerable people. Remember, trafficking is defined as exploitation, anything in exchange of money for commercial sex, also labor, right? There are a lot of minors involved in labor, and that's another thinking. I'll never forget being told a story of a brother and sister in upstate New York working for a very wealthy family, very wealthy property. I'll say a farm. Yes, it's a farm. And they were minors, and doing, the girl was doing all the housework while the boy was working on the farm. And I said, well, shouldn't they be in school? Shouldn't they be, you know what? We're not going to open. Here's what was told to me by somebody in charge. I'm a little vague here, but I'm going to be a little vague. I was told, they're better off. They're on a beautiful farm with a beautiful home, and they're working and busy. And the country they come from, the kids from the time they are born, they work. From the time they can walk, they're out in the streets collecting pennies, or whatever their currency is in their country. So this is nothing. So just let them alone. It's better for them than the foster care system. Now that sounds horrible, but the foster care system, that is an entirely other exploitation market where most that I have talked to survivors who've been through the foster system as adults have told me repeatedly that they were trafficked, re-exploited. So what are we doing in the United States about foster care, group homes? Terrible. So the question we don't nearly ask enough, though, is, who's creating this demand? We talk about traffickers nonstop, I admit. We talk about victims, yes we do, and survivors, and we talk about arrests. But what about the person who is paying for the sex? Because if we want to disrupt the trafficking, it's always go after the money, follow the money, and that is the person who is buying that person or that child. Human trafficking is a crime of exploitation for profit. It is that simple. And traffickers make money because there's a market for commercial sex. So we need, our justice system. This is what I believe, heading up the Warriors. We believe the justice system needs to be absolutely clear that the person being exploited is the person who should not be carrying the blame for exploitation. And we're shaking it up. And luckily, there are judges with new thinking. They're being educated. The legal system, we've got some great lawyers who are bringing this forth and really trying to change this antiquated judicial system. Because too often a trafficking survivor, again, is viewed through this lens of prostitution rather than trauma, coercion, and exploitation. And the studies show that about 97% in prostitution have been forced into that. And that is a definition of human trafficking: force, fraud, coercion. So this has to change. The victim is not the customer, and the victim's not the trafficker, and the victim's not the market. So today we're asking a different question. What happens if we stop normalizing the buyer? Because the internet, online, has normalized all of this sexual exploitation, right? The entertainment business, just society as a whole. And what happens? People become it becomes normalized and habituated. It's kind of one in one ear, out the other. So sex trafficking is a business built around exploitation. But we want to change that and go after the money trail, and it is being done. But again, look, a victim will also report they don't even know they're being trafficked. They don't understand. Their mental fortitude is all screwed up. They're believing a trafficker who is taking them in, who has maybe plied them with drugs, who also very often gets them to commit other crimes to hold that against them. So again, when they get arrested for just for prostitution, it's also petty larceny, grand theft, shoplifting, all these things that they have to fight because they've been coerced, right? So let's talk about the justice system. We have a great interview coming up next week with Judge Fernando Camacho, Human Trafficking Court here in New York. We're going to learn a lot more about the justice system, what he has been trying to do, more about victims, survivors of this. And I like to say, don't change the dial. This is food for thought, something to think about. But we do not talk about the buyer nearly enough. We're talking about the prostitute, which I don't even like to say. I like to say those who have been exploited, those who have been prostituted. We are talking about a trafficker. We are talking about a slap on the wrist. And it's time we change all that and go after those who are committing these crimes. I mean, really go after them, not a slap on the wrist. Because these are fathers and brothers and sons. And it is absolutely to think that one human being would buy a child. Think about that. Remember, our hashtag at the Warriors is Community Creates Change. We want to shake it up. We want to educate you. We want to bring you facts. We want to bring you expert guests. Don't forget to share these videos. We want a great big thanks to all of you who donate. We have a diaper drive going on right now because the third week of September is the National Diaper Week, and 1 out of 2 families are reporting they're having a hard time buying diapers. How horrible is that? I don't have to explain that to you, leaving a child in a dirty diaper. So we at the Warriors are collecting donations for that, diapers, monetary. We also, a great big shout out for all the Warrior. I want to talk, so I leave you with this. Think about what I'm telling you. It may not be easy. It may be disturbing and alarming, but this is happening in your backyard in America, and it is unacceptable. So join us at the Warriors, and when you wake up each and every day, go out and be a warrior.